Good morning, Britain, from Westminster Abbey on the 19th of September 2022. A momentous day, the day our Queen Elizabeth II is laid to rest. A day marked by mourning, but also a day of remembrance for a much-loved monarch who remained steadfast in her duty to the nation.
In less than 30 minutes, the last people to see the Queen lying in state will emerge from Westminster Hall. Like hundreds of thousands of others, they have waited as long as it takes to patiently pay their respects.
Royalty from around the world will join presidents, prime ministers and specially invited members of the public at the state funeral in just a few hours' time. It will be both a public farewell and a private time of sorrow for her family, who have lost a mother, grandmother and great-grandmother.
On her 21st birthday, she made a commitment to the nation, declaring, "My whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service," service which she went on to embody for over 70 years.
Those decades saw much joy and also much sorrow, with the grief of losing her husband of 73 years, perhaps the most painful. She gave us a glimpse of that pain when she described Prince Philip as her strength and stay.
As we turn the chapter on the Elizabethan age, we remember the Queen's ability to connect people, her ability to speak to the nation in good times and bad.
For the legions of people around the world who have followed, admired and loved her, today will be spent remembering her contribution and devotion to this country and the Commonwealth, as we say a final goodbye to Queen Elizabeth II. This is how we'll remember Her Majesty, with a warm smile and a sparkle in her eyes. This newly released picture was taken back in May, ahead of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations. A moment of joy for her great-grandchildren, Prince George and Princess Charlotte. Today, their task will be heavier. Aged just 9 and 7, they'll walk behind the coffin before joining 2,000 guests at Westminster Abbey for the grandest of farewells. Just before 11:15, the procession leaves Westminster Hall and moves to the west gate of the Abbey. The funeral begins at 11 o'clock. Towards the end, the last post will sound and the nation will fall silent for 2 minutes. Then the Queen's coffin will be escorted in a mile-long procession through central London. The King and members of the royal family will walk behind it, through Whitehall and onto the Mall, past Buckingham Palace for the last time. The procession will come to an end at Wellington Arch, where the coffin will be moved into the state hearse. That will then travel the 25 miles to Windsor, where, shortly after 3 o'clock, it will go down the long walk to the castle. At 4 p.m, it will enter St George's Chapel for a committal service. Later this evening at 7:30, there'll be a private burial for the family, and the Queen will finally be laid to rest, alongside the Duke of Edinburgh, her late parents, and the ashes of her sister, Princess Margaret. Last night on the Mall, cheers for the new King, who's thankful for all the support. In London, Edinburgh, Hillsborough and Cardiff, he said in a message, "We were moved beyond measure by everyone who took the trouble to come and pay their respects to the lifelong service of my dear mother, the late Queen. As we all prepare to say our last farewell," he added, "I wanted simply to take this opportunity to say thank you to all those countless people who have been such a support and comfort to my family and myself in this time of grief." As presidents, princes and prime ministers flock to pay their respects and the world prepares to say goodbye, King Charles and his family will have had little time to pause. The First Lady of Ukraine was among those they welcomed, as Buckingham Palace last night hosted one of the largest gatherings of leaders in recent years. But amid the diplomacy, reflection too.
She was the same in person as her image. Decent, honorable, and all about service. And our hearts go out to the royal family.
Thousands of words have been spoken in tribute to Her Majesty in the last 10 days, but last night it was the silence that said the most. The long queues filing past the Queen's coffin stilled, even as outside cheers rang out in her memory. And this 10-mile-long symbol of our need for a final moment with our monarch has finally come to an end. With some desperate dashes, not to miss out on being a part of history.
And the opportunity presented itself this evening.
So we ran.
To the train station?
Yep, and we ran all the way here.
Oh, the Queen means the world to me, and it will be a wonderful opportunity to pay her our last respects.
For many across the globe, as well as for all of us, it's hard to imagine the country without her. But today, the second Elizabethan age ends. Tomorrow, a new chapter will begin.
Well, throughout the morning, we're going to be at live key locations for today's historic state funeral. Kate Garraway is at Buckingham Palace for us, and Charlotte Hawkins is inside the grounds of Windsor Castle, where, of course, the Queen will be laid to rest later on.
First to Kate. Kate, King Charles says he has been moved beyond measure by the outpouring of grief in Britain at his mother's death, and today world leaders will join the nation to say a final farewell to the Queen.
They will indeed, Susanna, and that began here at Buckingham Palace, that gathering of people and presidents and prime ministers and princes and princesses and kings and queens and even an emperor, an empress of Japan. That gathered on the most extraordinary sunset last night. It was like the sky was burning with an orange glow. And it began about 5 o'clock. President Biden arrived in the Beast just before 6. Others, though, were bussed in for this special King Charles's reception in Buckingham Palace. And already the challenges that we're going to see trying to be resolved throughout the day began last night, because the King and Queen of Spain, the former King and Queen of Spain, travelled with people from Ireland, representing Ireland, and they were in a separate bus from the current King and Queen of Spain, who travelled with the King and Queen of Sweden, because the tensions between the former and current king are very present. But once inside, they had some drinks and some canapes, but all tensions current within their political worlds disappeared for the minute silence at 8 o'clock, which King Charles led inside the palace, as we saw right across the country. And I think amongst the people that have gathered here, it is that pausing that is the foremost emotion this morning. We've been here, haven't we, for jubilation, for jubilees, for celebrations, for wedding, in shock 10 days ago when the news of her passing was announced, and then also just pure, unadulterated grief. But when we got here just after 3 this morning, from the people that were already camping here on the Mall, I think you've got some images of that, it was very much a feeling of this was the moment to kind of come together, to put aside all the worries that we have in our own lives, the fear of the autumn to come and economic worries, and just stand and for once wait for a day that none of us will ever see again or are likely to see again, certainly not on this scale. And perhaps that's the reason why that a portrait was released last night. I think you've already featured it this morning. Ranald McKechnie, he has photographed the Queen before, back in 2020. He photographed the Queen and her then 3 heirs, I believe, all gathered together. And this that you're seeing now is the new one. So beautiful, taken in May for the Jubilee celebrations. One at the time was released, and this one was held back. And it seems to fit so well, doesn't it, with the words that the Queen Consort Camilla said about her shining blue eyes and the smile that lit up the room. For those that are interested, by the way, she is wearing her pearls, her favourite pearls. She's wearing an aquamarine and diamond brooch in that picture, which was given to her by her father, King George VI, on her 18th birthday. And she's worn for the 75th VE Day celebration. She wore at her Diamond Jubilee. And it's just a wonderful thing, I think, that photograph, to bring together the past, the present, and that wonderful warm smile that for many is the thing that gave the Queen her kindness and her respect. We've also had confirmed that Prince George and Prince Charlotte will take part in today's funeral preparations. Some discussion over their ages at 9 and 7, but they're going to walk as part of that procession behind their mum and dad, the Prince of Wales, and in front of their uncle and aunt, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And when she finally leaves Westminster Abbey, she will come down the Mall here, where, as you can see, people are already gathering. She will pass by Buckingham Palace for the very last time in the hearse, and she will head that way out through London down to Windsor, where she will have a final moment of rest, which is where Charlotte is for us this morning.
Yes, the Queen will be coming here to Windsor on her final journey. She'll be coming from Westminster Abbey, as you were saying, Kate. Some 2,300 police officers will line that route, as of course will many members of the public. Many thousands are expected as well to see her on that final journey to here, which will be her resting place. Now, just after 3 o'clock, she'll arrive here at Windsor. She'll be taken on a final procession up the Long Walk, which is that tree-lined avenue that leads here to Windsor Castle. Once inside the castle, the King and other members of the royal family will join that procession. Now, she loved it here at Windsor Castle. During her reign, she spent so many weekends here. Back in March 2021, she made it her home because of the pandemic. And it was just a month later that she lost her beloved husband, Prince Philip. And of course, we all remember those poignant photos, those pictures of her sat on her own in St George's Chapel at the funeral because of COVID restrictions. Well, in just a few hours' time, she will be reunited with the Duke of Edinburgh once again in that chapel. She will be the 11th monarch to be buried there. Now, at 4 o'clock, the committal service will begin. It'll be conducted by the Dean of Windsor, and some 800 people will be here. That's members of the royal household, members of the Queen's, the Windsor estate here, those loyal members of staff, as well as family members as well. There are going to be some hugely significant moments during this service. The King at one point will place a flag over her coffin. The Lord Chamberlain will break his ceremonially break his office staff that he has and place it on her coffin, and a piper will play a lament as her coffin is lowered into the royal vault. And then at 7:30 this evening, there will be a private family burial service in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. It's been described as a deeply personal family occasion for them. Now, this is when she will be buried alongside her beloved husband, her strength and stay, Prince Philip, as well as her father, her mother, and her sister. Now, her father had written to her shortly after her wedding to say, "Our family, us four, must remain together." And in just a few hours' time, they will once again be all together.
Charlotte, thank you.
Final mourner to view the Queen lying in state was due to be allowed into Westminster Hall at around 6:30 this morning, before it is closed to the public ahead of the state funeral.
But it's happened much quicker than that. Jonathan Swain is in Victoria Tower Gardens, right next to the Palace of Westminster. We can see people processing in right now, Jonathan. It's estimated there's somewhere between, and there's quite a wide range, 350,000 up to maybe 700,000 people have queued, some of them for up to 24 hours to pay their last respects to Her Majesty. And that's coming to a close very shortly.
Morning, Ben. Well, this is the final few moments, and the final few footsteps are being taken by members of the public. We just spoke to Christina Hearsey from High Wycombe. She was the last person, the very last person in the queue, and it's actually her second time of actually paying her respects to Her Majesty the Queen. She's been in the queue for around sort of 7 hours, but at times it has been as many as 24 hours at its peak. But the queue has taken on a whole personality and a life of its own, hasn't it, over the past 4.5 days. Some should say some 350,000 people are thought to have paid their respects to Her Majesty the Queen. And if we just sort of take a look now, you can see the last few people are just making their way in to pay their respects to Westminster Hall.
Jonathan, thank you.
It is an enormous privilege to have been able to do that, to spend time paying our last respects, but also those hours in the queue as well that are coming to an end now. And you can see the emotion etched on people's faces. I think almost the fact that they are the last in the queue must
it's going to resonate further, isn't it? But it's a huge commitment. I mean, when we were talking and you were in the queue, I think you were queuing for 7 hours and 20 minutes in total with your mum and a friend, so very emotional that you could be together. And we had that over and over again from these people that have met like-minded people that they just wanted to feel connected to in the queue. And when you do anything like that, an endeavour, because it really is an endeavour to stay there for that long, for this moment, you can understand why, for some, they are overwhelmed with emotional.
Yeah. Whether you are religious or not, whether you are a royalist or not, it feels like a sort of pilgrimage and a historic moment, a historic opportunity. And you can see why hundreds of thousands of people have gone to Southwark Park originally, Bermondsey, south of the river, to walk. I mean, and to Westminster Hall. Now, of course, people queuing for the funeral to have the chance of seeing the procession of the coffin. And, of course, that is going to get underway in a few hours' time.
It's very emotional, isn't it? And quite sort of a real sense of calm here this morning in front of this beautiful abbey behind us. It's just exquisite. You see the sun coming up as well. It's still quite dark where we were, but where you could see just around Parliament Square over to our right. You can see people starting to gather and some of the security as well. It's going to be compelling, I think, all morning.
Yeah, it's like a swan, isn't it? Yeah. On the surface, serene, calm and still as you'd expect. But under the surface, obviously security, police, the military working
all the hard work
so hard to make sure that this is incredibly safe and goes according to plan. Good Morning Britain is here all the way through until 9:30 on this momentous day, and still ahead we will be reflecting on the past 10 days where the nation has mourned the life and legacy of Britain's longest-serving monarch.
By now we're going to get the news, weather and travel where you are. We'll see you in a bit.